Hello and welcome back to the AA guide on how to buy an electric vehicle in Ireland. And today's video is just one of a whole series on buying an EV where we look at range and charging and a whole host of other things. But today we want to focus on money because the sticker price that might be on the window of a car doesn't tell the whole story. There's a lot more to figure out if you're thinking about buying an EV. So today we want to look at tax, insurance, fuel, maintenance, and what makes up the whole package and how you can figure out the cost of buying an EV and what you can afford essentially.
Take a moment, enjoy the calm. You could be stuck on the N7 with two teething toddlers, but we don't do stress at the AA. We do roadside rescue, and our trained mechanics fix 8 out of 10 problems at the roadside. Buy online now at theAA.ie. Relax. Yellow and black have got your back.
It's fair to say in Ireland at the moment that the electric version is going to be more expensive than the petrol or diesel one. But that's not really painting the full picture because you need to look into the details of it. So if you're thinking about buying something like a Peugeot 208 or a Hyundai Kona, for example, you look at the cheapest petrol versions and then the electric counterparts, and there's a big price gap in there. There really is a good difference. But as you go into the details and you look at the spec of the interior, what you get for it, the size of the wheels, the power of the motors, you'll probably find that the electric one has a lot higher spec than that cheaper petrol one. So it is fair to say that it's more expensive, but if you're going to spec it out and add on a few options, you might find that that gap is a lot smaller than it initially looked. Total cost of ownership is something that's crucial to mention at this stage, because what people tend to do, and we see it all the time, is they look at the sticker price in a car, they say, well, that's 40,000 euros, that's a lot more expensive than the one that's 35. And yes, that's fair enough. But ask yourself, how many people have 50 grand lying down the back of the couch that they just walk into a dealership, go, there's a bundle of cash and I'll have my car? People tend to finance it, they tend to pay for that over a long period of time, or they lease it. So that sticker price does not paint the whole picture at all. And that's where total cost of ownership comes in, because at that stage what you're looking at is how much does that car cost you over, let's say, the 3 or the 5 year term that you have it. So that includes things like depreciation. If you bought the car for 50 grand, is it now worth 25? How much did you pay on fuel over the course of it? What was maintenance like? Did you find yourself paying 500 euros every year when you went to get your service? Maybe a couple of fan belts or timing belts had to be changed. Insurance, there's a whole lot to consider, and what people really need to do is just take out a pen and paper, spend a few minutes, get an Excel spreadsheet, whatever suits you, you be you, and just figure out how much I'm going to spend on this car over the 5 years. Track it back then, and you may realize that the car you thought was cheaper is actually more expensive over time, and vice versa. It's worth mentioning grants as well, because that's an important part if you are considering buying an EV, because there are quite generous grants there available as an incentive to buy an EV over a combustion car. Now, the main one that we're talking about is the SEAI grant of 5,000 euros. But just be careful on that, because there's a cut-off point of 60,000 euros. So if you spend over that on the cost of the car, you won't get that 5 grand back from the SEAI. And that's really important when it comes to certain models that you're considering. Take the example of the Polestar 2 just behind me. That in its base model, all in, is going to be about 57,000, 58,000 euros, but then you get to take your 5,000 grant off that, so you're only paying about 52. However, if you want to step up and get the one that I have here today, which is the dual motor, that kicks the cost just above 60,000 euros, in which case you don't get the grant. So the price difference is about 12,000 euros for the extra little bit of power inside. And that is really worth considering when you're looking at buying an EV. Make sure that the car you're looking for gets the grants, and possibly shop around, because you might find yourself getting much better value by just slightly trading down on what you're looking for. Tax is worth mentioning, your motor tax. Now, it's probably not that important in the grand scheme of things once we calculate the whole cost of ownership, but still it's worth mentioning, because EVs only pay 120 euros road tax. Now, that is not hugely important, because you might pay something like 200 euros for a lot of petrol and diesel cars. But if you do want something that has a good bit of performance to it, such as a car that has 400 horsepower like this one, it's an EV, it's still only 120 euros tax. But if you're looking at a petrol or diesel combustion counterpart, you might find that that difference is actually quite big. At that stage, it's worth thinking about. You really have to consider maintenance when it comes to choosing your next vehicle. And that's one of the great things about EVs, is that they're quite simple machines in general, really, as in not much goes wrong with them. So the motor itself is pretty much a sealed unit that will never be opened in the lifetime of the car, and same goes for the battery. Now, you do need to look out for tires, tire pressure, suspension checks, keep your washer topped up. things like that. But in general, you don't have all those timing belts, fan belts, spark plugs, oil changes. There's so very little that goes wrong. So something like a Nissan Leaf, you might pay €150 for a basic service, and that's about it. There's very little to be changed after that. And it really does have to be considered when it comes to the total cost of ownership and whether or not an EV is a good choice for you.
Calculating the cost of electricity that will run your car will be very important. Unfortunately, there's no hard and fast rule, as each car and driver are different. A 2.5-ton SUV will obviously use a lot more fuel than a city car just pottering around town. But what you can do is use the AA fuel price survey to get a good idea of the cost difference between petrol, diesel and electricity. We have recently introduced a metric for electricity prices. Just go onto the blog section of our website and search for fuel prices. That tells you the average price that an equivalent petrol, diesel or electric car will pay in fuel to cover the national average. For example, in February 2023, with petrol prices averaging €1.65 per litre and diesel at €1.68, the average Irish driver was paying €2,003 to fuel their petrol car, €1,680 to fuel their diesel, but only €1,306 to fuel their electric car. This is 34% less than the petrol equivalent. However, those that have cheap electricity at night could be paying as little as €420.
You really should factor in depreciation when it comes to the costs of a car and trying to figure that out. Now, there's no hard and fast rule for saying this is exactly how much a car will depreciate after 2 or 5 or 10 years. Markets change all the time, and what you get back might go up or down over the course of 6 months or even a year. So definitely worth looking into it. Now, one way you could do that is just go online to a website that has ads for used cars, and you can see, well, that car was 30,000 when it was new. After 2 years it was only worth 18,000, and you can get a real good picture for how much a car is going to depreciate over time. Now, one of the good things about EVs is that the battery in them is always going to be worth something. So even if you ran this car for 300,000 kilometers and it was falling apart after that, over 15 or 20 years, it was just that stage, it had done its life, the battery inside it is still going to be worth a little bit of money. Even if it has suffered degradation, there'll still be good energy capacity in there, and that's going to be worth a lot of money for somebody who's looking at commercial or home energy storage systems. So as you can see, there's a huge difference between the sticker price on a car and the total cost of ownership and how much that's going to cost you over the length of time that you own the car. So it really does pay to do your homework, to sit down with a piece of paper or a spreadsheet and go through the tax, the insurance, likely maintenance, how much am I going to get for that car when I do go to sell it in a few years' time? Because it really does paint an overall picture and helps you to figure out, well, which car is best for me? Is it worth spending a little bit more up front, or should I buy the cheaper one? And figure out what you can actually afford. Now, of course, this is just one of a whole series of videos, so if you have other thoughts and questions on whether or not an EV is for you, please do go check out the other series where we talk about charging, about range, and plenty of other topics like that. And of course, jump onto our website, theAA.ie, where we have got tens, even hundreds of articles all about motoring in Ireland. Insurance quotes, home insurance quotes, breakdown rescue and all the rest. And we'll see you on the next one.